we are here at the Future Earth Summit. My dear people, so what is sustainability? That is something that we have been constantly hearing this whole day, not just this whole day. One of the most important point or aspect of the summit of future itself is sustainability because we are aligned with United Nations Pact for the future. So is sustainability just about doing less or is it about doing more good? And I guess we will all have to agree with the latter. But how to do more for the earth? And we have got two iconic voices to be telling us or to be enlightening us more about how to attain this sustainability. And one, we already have had the pleasure of listening to her in the morning itself, Ms. Renjini Thampi, the honorable founder of Vapasee. Thank you so much and welcome back again. And yes, the next person to be joining with us, definitely she needs no intro. All of you must be very familiar with her. But anyhow, let me take the liberty to be introducing her. With us, we have Ms. Apoorva Bose, an international human rights lawyer who works as the program coordinator, the Global Initiative G20 at UNCZD. And she holds a master's degree in the international law from the Graduate Industry in Geneva and did her bachelor's degree in legal studies from the National University of Advanced Legal Studies, India. So apart from all her professional achievement, we all know that like she is donning many hats as that of an actor, a singer, and a classical dancer, and she's also a TEDx speaker and was awarded the 30 under 30 recognition for lawyers and legal influencers by the BW Business World in 2021. What a great privilege to be having the both of you with us. Kindly be seated. We are all very excited to be listening to what you have got to bring to the table. Please.
Hello, hi. So, post afternoon session is always a little slow to start, but I hope we will keep it interesting. So, you have got the whole intro of Apoorva boss, who was actually she was with UNEP before, and now she is with UNCCD. And we would like to know a couple of things from a global perspective, because that is something we hear very less. So for students and the faculties here, I think this is a great opportunity to know Apoorva and the works which you have done so far and how it has changed the world so far. So that's something which we would like to know. And to start with, you have been working in the land reformation segment for a while now, and because you're a lawyer, you have everything around law making and the policy making, and the parliamentarians are the ones whom you are always with. So, how do you think that has impacted the whole changing process or land reformation? How that has impacted the whole system?
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's a true honor to be here. Also, to be in this session with somebody I know personally as well for a lot of years, actually. So it's always a true pleasure, Ranjini, to be here with you. And before I go into details about the specifics of the job, I also want to pose certain questions to you, our lovely audience. And I always say that I'm always very excited to be speaking to young people because I'm very inspired by the ideas, the innovations, just sheer motivation and passion that all of you have when it comes to the environment, when it comes to land. And I always end up taking back a lot of lessons from every interaction with especially young people. So thank you for joining the session today. Before I go into the specifics, as I mentioned, I want to zoom out a little bit and get a sense of what my lovely audience today actually knows about land and land restoration, because these are all very jargony, very complex terminologies, right? So let's break it down to what you know. Have you all heard about the Rio Conventions, the Holy Trinity, the Rio Conventions? I just need a basic show of hands, basically. Have you heard about the Rio Conventions from 1992? and I don't see a show of hands, which is great because then I can talk a little bit more about the work that I do, and I probably don't feel as redundant. So Rio Conventions was born in 1992, where 100 world leaders came together and they realized the importance of looking into three ecosystems. The first one, which is climate change, and that is called the UNFCCC, the first convention. You might have heard about the climate change and the convention around climate change because it's, for me, I think that's the famous cousin out of the Holy Trinity because everyone talks about climate change. We know that climate change is real and it's happening around us, the floods that we see in Kerala and the wildfires, etc. The second convention is the convention on the biodiversity. Again, still famous. It's known as the People's Convention. We just wrapped up a conference of parties, which is one of those huge conferences that UN organizes. And it's important because it deals a lot with local communities, with indigenous communities. So that we have the Biodiversity Convention, which is the second one. Third is where I work, and my work predominantly involves, which is UNCCD, which is the Convention on Land. Now, you might think, okay, is land crisis a real thing? Like, of course, climate change is real. Of course, biodiversity loss is real. But is land a real crisis? Yes, it is. Because let's zoom out and think about it for a second, right? And you'll understand it with a few basic statistics that I can talk about. 70% of the land that we see today is already altered by humanity. And in that, 20 to 40% is already degraded. We have about 4.8 billion hectares of agriculture land around us. In that, about 40% is already degraded. We have about 4.1 billion hectares of forests around us. And in that, every year we're losing about 4 million hectares of forests. Urbanization is altering land. Mining is degrading land as well. And we see a lot of open pit mines in India itself. I have seen in Orissa and a lot of other places. And we don't see a lot of restoration around these areas. And that's where my work really comes into the fore. And while preparing for this event, I actually did a basic Google search, which also talks about why land is not being really spoken about, right? When I Googled climate change crisis, I got about 508 million articles. When I Googled biodiversity crisis, I got about 68 million odd articles. But when I Googled about land crisis, I think I got about like 2.8 million articles. And you can see the stark difference in the interest and also in how many people are actually talking about the land crisis. And land is very important because the clothes that we wear, the medicines that we consume, the food that we eat, everything comes from land. But there's, of course, a discord because right now, if I ask a student, and I actually have, I asked where do medicines come from, and they said the pharmacy. And if you ask them where do clothes come from, they say, the shopping complex and, and so on and so forth. So there's clearly a discord. And that's where my work at the G20 Global Land Initiative and UNCCD is extremely important. And my specific role involves building capacity by working with various stakeholders like private sector, young people such as yourself, innovators, ecopreneurs, and of course, a very important category of people, the one that you spoke about, which is parliamentarians or lawmakers. Why is working with lawmakers important? I think it's quite simple. They actually form the fabric, the law of the very society we live in, right? So it's very important to speak to them because policymakers and people at the UN, we can be making policies and policy briefs one after the other. And it's very easy for us, people with technical knowledge, to actually churn out paper after the other. But if it's not implemented, is it really useful? Is it really making a difference? And 2 years back, when I started off at the G20 Global Land Initiative, I worked with this other UN agency called the UN System Staff College, and we created this program called the Global Changemaker Academy for parliamentarians. And every year we get about 30 parliamentarians from around the world with diverse backgrounds to come to Bonn in Germany where we give them a 5-day exclusive course on why land should be on every agenda. Why aren't your lawmakers, why aren't your members of parliaments and MLAs talking about land? It should be on every agenda. And we give them a holistic understanding about how land affects gender. Land is very important for young people. How can we see land as an opportunity? Because a lot of ecopreneurs work on land and actually make money out of land by restoring land. So we've had about two cohorts right now for GCAP, and the new cohort, we're just working on it right now. And the impact of it actually is quite, for me, it's really nice to see how it really unfolds, right? Because a lot of these parliamentarians have gone back to Nepal and other countries around the world, and they've introduced personal bills in their parliament. They are creating a discourse around land. Some of them, they come back and say that it's the first time that anybody is really talking about land restoration and giving statistics. So a lot of the countries, they are the members of parliament have introduced it for the first time. A lot of them goes for international events, for conference of parties, for other international events, and they become voices for us. They talk about land, they talk about the importance of land restoration. So the impact right now is seen through these, different lenses. But I'm sure in the coming years, our hope and prayer is that at least 100 countries around the world build laws around land. I'm not sure whether you all must be aware, but last year the EU Parliament passed a law called the Nature Restoration Law, which is huge. There was a lot of back and forth. We almost thought that it's not going to happen, and that legitimizes our cause, because their idea is that, and what the law says is that by 2030, they will actually restore 20% of EU's land and seas, which is huge, and which also legitimizes G20 Global Land Initiative's mandate as well, because what we talk about is reducing degraded land by 50% by 2040. So for all of that to happen, we need to work with parliamentarians. We need to see impact from them. So as young people and as people who work in this sector, we need to hold them accountable. We need to make them talk about land and land restoration.
Thank you for that, because I think I learned a lot from, because though I'm working in the sustainability segment, as you told, it is one topic we never talk about, I guess. I've not seen anyone talking about land restoration, though we have seen it somewhere here and there, but it is not an elaborate topic as you are addressing right now. And I think it's a need of the hour, because especially during today, the segments are all on Earth. So when you are talking about Earth, the first thing which comes into mind is land. But we have very less narratives on it, and I think this is the first time I am sitting in a place where we are talking about it. Though when I went for COP, there was a person who I saw. They work on the same thing. They just came back from the land COP and they were talking about it. So that's when, okay, that's something that was there, but that was just a lunch time talk. It was nothing more than that. But now I think we know much more than that lunch talk. It's like so vast to talk, and it is one thing, like how you're talking about climate change right now, why we are doing this 1.5 degree thing. And I think in some time we will talk about this as well. And it is the youth which will talk. And coming to that, and I think you work a lot with the youth. And could you tell me how it has brought in a measurable change in the whole spectrum of the work you're doing?
Sure. As I mentioned right at the beginning, I think nothing gives me pleasure as much as mentoring young people, talking to young people, really hearing their ideas. And it's always such a pleasure to be learning so much from them about land, about climate change, about what are the kind of innovations that you can bring about to actually create a change, to move the needle. So I truly, truly believe that working with young people is what is actually going to bring about that change. You spoke about young people being, and we all speak about young people being really passionate. But do I see passionate individuals and there being a gap between actual impact and measurable impact? Yes. And in my experience, working with young people, there are a few challenges that I foresee when it comes to measurable impact from passionate individuals such as yourself. And The first one is platform. And when I talk about platform, it's about finding a space for young people to be able to talk about what are they really facing, what are the kind of challenges they're facing, how can they bring about solutions. Like, even when I was in school, I had such amazing ideas, but then where do I really start? Who do I really speak to? What's the kind of mentorship that I can reach out to? So I think first is definitely access to the right platforms. And again, I think this is a caveat that I always talk about. When we talk about access to platforms, what we generally don't bring about is the discord between access to platforms in a rural setting and access to platforms in an urban setting, which are very two different things. And having worked in both sectors, I think it's very important to always address that and talk about how there's a huge privilege that it comes to, that it comes as being a part of somebody who comes from an urban setting. Second is of course skill sets, right? We might have a brilliant idea, but we might not really know or have the technical knowledge, the skill sets to really bring that idea to the fore. Now, when I was working with UNEP, we did this massive online course. We created this massive online course on nature-based solutions. And at that time, which was a couple of years ago, nature-based solutions was still something that was new and people were just starting to talk about it. When we created the course was actually not for young people. I mean, in a way it was, but we were mainly targeting people who are practitioners, people who were, working in the sector, academicians, etc., etc. But what we realized is that we actually reached 100,000 registrants for the course and about 15,000 completions, and most of them were young people. So we realized that, okay, like young people really want to talk about nature-based solutions and these innovative ways in which they can incorporate nature-based solutions into their daily life. So we did this social media campaign to understand and gauge what are the innovative ideas that they're coming with after doing this course. And such fantastic innovations. And what we did was we gave them the skill sets by creating the MOOC for young people. And then, of course, providing the platform, which is, social media or other platforms for them to actually talk about it, for them to actually reach out to mentors within our team who can guide them on, what can they do next. Another thing which I've realized is I also used to work in Nigeria, and the space that I worked in, it was this area called Ogoni land. It's heartbreaking how ravaged the entire area is because of oil spill, and because of that, years of oppression and lack of development, etc. And they had such fantastic ideas about young people, had such fantastic ideas about what can they do in their communities, but they didn't really know how to communicate in an articulate manner. They didn't know how to reach out to the UN. So when we started engaging with the community, we taught them as simple as this: how to use social media, how to use, how to take a video and post about it and talk about it. And after that, the government actually started listening to them. They actually started giving them livelihoods sessions, capacity building workshops, etc. Just because these bunch of young people got a platform to talk about the difficulties and challenges that they're facing, and they wanted solutions. They wanted the government to listen to them. So, as I said, second would be skills. And third for me is definitely learning opportunities. And by learning opportunities, I don't mean the textbook education. That's one way of looking at learning opportunities. And the second is, of course, experiential learning, right? And I don't know how much things have really changed in our country, but when I studied, I feel like there was a huge dearth of experiential learning. And I realized this actually when I went for a conference recently. There was a booth, and they had this really interesting exhibit in their booth where they had, and it was a game. It was an exhibit and a game. So they had a cotton t-shirt, they had a bowl of pasta and a bunch of other things. And on the other side, they had a cotton plant, they had a tomato plant, etc. And we had to match the object, the output with the source. And I had no idea what all of these plants really looked like. And I mean, it wasn't as embarrassing because clearly the other people that came with me for the conference also had no idea. I knew how cotton plant looked like, but that ended right there. So, is there a discord between our education system and the experiential learning? Absolutely. And I still believe that it exists in every education system around the world. So, the G20 Global Land Initiative is also creating something called nature labs. The idea is twofold. One, which is encouraging curriculums around the world to incorporate land restoration to their respective curriculums. And secondly, to also have something called a nature lab in every school. I do know of instances in Delhi where the state government has implemented something called the Miyawaki forest in every school, in every state school. And I think they have about 20 to 30 odd Miyawaki forests in its school. I know that probably in Kerala as well, there are schools where they have this nature lab and Miyawaki forest that's implemented. And I think it's fantastic. I think as young people, you should be knowing what are the local species in your area, what are the kind of plants that you should grow in your area. And I think all this is very important for us to learn, not just from an academic point of view, but also from a sustainable living point of view. So yes, I think there is a discord, but I have a lot of belief in the youth of today, and I do think that they have the space to really express, especially with social media, the kind of ideas and thought process that they have, and to reach out to the right people and to reach out to mentors who can guide them in the right direction.
Thank you, Apoorva. That was quite detailed. I think so many of them had taken some inspiration for sure, because I think there are cohorts from India as well, if I'm not wrong. So that would be an opportunity for many of them who are hearing it. So, and it's an exposure, to be very frank, to know other things. We might not be those people who are starting something, but to understand the global scenario and how these things work in a wider perspective is very, very important. And I think it's like catch them young. So I think that works more. I truly believe if you have a behavioral change which you're trying to bring at this age, it is, there are some major changes which might come in the future. And in the morning, we had a session where Sir G. Shankar was explaining about how land is important actually. And, you shouldn't be building buildings just like because of the understanding that, okay, let me build the building on it. No, the building should be owned by the land. It has to be something part of the land, not like build on it kind of situation. We were talking about trees being planted, how important it is, to hug a tree, how important it is to understand that small things which you want to embrace, and then how it can become a big one. So I think there is a lot of insights from what you spoke. And again, we had a very interesting conversation, and she had told me that there was an AI movie created for land reformation, which actually it was very new for me. I knew that there are short films, like advertisements created from AI, but I never knew that there is a whole movie being created on AI for land reformation. That too, which was shown in the COP land. Yeah, so that itself is something which I would like to hear. I think most of us are talking about AI now, so that's why one of the hottest topics. In future also, we are talking a lot of AI. So I think could you please let us know how it was? What was the experience you had doing that?
Sure. I mean, now before we go into the AI film itself, I do think art and storytelling is such a powerful medium when it comes to awareness as well as advocacy. And we've seen that from time immemorial for that matter. My idea of the nature and world around me stems a lot from watching Animal Planet and Discovery Channel as a child. And and I'm sure a lot of young people who watch like Our Planet by David Attenborough also has the same kind of experience, and so on and so forth. So while at COP this year, I actually met a lot of lovely artists who does exactly this. I had the pleasure of interviewing somebody. He's a filmmaker known around the world, and his name is Juliano Salgado. He has an organization in Brazil, and they basically work on restoring the Rio Doce Basin. And the organization is called Instituto Terra. If you have the opportunity to watch his film, it's called Salt of the Earth. The film, in fact, I think won a special jury award at the Cannes. He was also nominated in the Oscars, etc. Fantastic filmmaker. And just to see how he has used filmmaking to talk about land and to talk about restoration was so fascinating for me. And I met so many artists. In fact, there's also like a festival in South Africa where 3 days they just talk about restoration. And it's really nice because what they also do is they bring people from indigenous communities where they present art forms that's almost dying. And it was very interesting for me to note that a lot of these dying art forms, there are already folk music and a lot of narratives around land. So it's also a way of making sure that you keep those art forms alive. And I'm sure it's the same with Kerala as well. I'm sure there are a lot of folk music and a lot of art forms that talks about land, that talks about environment. And it'll be really interesting in the future to see how Kerala manages to really bring about this culture of reviving these art forms by talking about climate change, by talking about restoration, and by spreading the word. And my incredible boss, who I believe also was in one of the sessions over here, his name is Murli Thumarugudi. He had this incredible idea that he wanted to do a movie on land restoration using AI. And we put out a post on LinkedIn and all our social platforms saying that we're looking for young people to work on this film. Please reach out to us. And this young Malayali boy who lives in the US, his name is Sean. He reached out to us and said that there's a group of people in Vanderbilt University in the US who has formed a collective called Tomorrow in Focus, where they only work around narratives on the environment, on sustainability and land. And they'd like to be a part of this project. And I had the opportunity to lead this project along with this amazing group of young people, college students in the US. We only met once in person actually when we premiered the film. All our workflow was digital. We did not meet at all in person. And it was really interesting to work with them. And I think it was a huge learning opportunity for me to be able to work with them. Now, when we talk about AI, I think it's also important to talk about two narratives, which should be mentioned before we actually talk about the film and how I think the film, all of you should watch it when it's out on YouTube. First, it's the fact that the ethical usage of AI, right? How do you ethically use AI? And there's a lot of discourse around. There's a lot of, AI is bad, AI is good, etc. But what we all know, and as you just rightly mentioned, AI is here to stay. So how do we work with it, around it? So we actually had a group of experts who are experts on ethical usage of AI, who worked with us. And one of the concerns, being somebody who's also from a creative field and who loves anything to do with creativity, my biggest worry was, are we really losing out on working with real artists, with real with real actors who brings in that depth of emotion, which you of course won't get with AI. At least at this point, you won't. That was one of my questions that I posed to the team. And the second is, how do you justify the use of AI? And in this film, what we did was, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because we still haven't premiered it publicly, is the fact that you need to justify the use of AI. Do we just want to make a film that's 100% AI just for the tag that, it's UN's first AI film? No, we did not want to use that. We wanted to, there was a huge portion of the film that was AI for sure, but there was also a section of the film that was shot in person with a crew, with actors in Nashville where the film was shot, because we wanted to reduce the carbon footprint. But it's the idea that we need AI to be used in a way that just enhances the traditional method of filmmaking. So for us, the film is called Imagine Land 2040. So for us, the imagination aspect of the film comes from AI. Anything that is real time comes from the actors who we had on board for the film. So that's one, which is ethical use of AI. So speaking to experts, speaking to people who specializes in ethical usage of AI is very important to work with them. And I think the second aspect of it is, as much as we say that we tried to make this film as sustainable as possible, the important point to note is as much as possible. There is a huge impact on environment when it comes to using AI. So we actually had a team that worked on understanding or comparing between the traditional making of the film, like what would the carbon footprint be when it comes to actually doing the film using traditional methods and flying people around the world. And second, what in comparison to using AI for the film. So we did like a huge study on this. We compared, we ran some numbers based on assumptions, etc. And that's when we decided that, okay, like we want to limit the usage of, limit the carbon footprint of the film, and how do we go about it? So I think that's the narrative that we need to talk about. It's the fact that AI is here to stay, but how do we make it as sustainable as possible, and how do we work around it? Now we have, I mean, we worked on Runway for the video generation, and we worked on Mid Journey for image generation, both of which taken a lot of energy, just because when it comes to making anything creative democratic, it comes with computational resources, and it's always connected to data centers, which means a lot of energy is being used, and the cooling methods right now are not as efficient as it should be. And this group of boys that I worked with, they're actually in the process of creating an entirely new service, which is much more carbon efficient, which is much more environmental friendly, etc. So that's where I think young people should be putting their thought process in. How can we make it more sustainable by bringing in new technology, by maybe using, as I mentioned, a lot of the energy consumption comes from being connected to data centers, right? Can we make the data centers connected to renewable energy centers? Can we have more efficient cooling methods that can be used? So these are some of the conversations I think we had in the team. And this AI movie, that I spoke about on land restoration, we also thought about like diverse actors for it. So it kind of takes you to different parts of the world, by not really taking you to different parts of the world because we did not travel. There was a boy from Senegal. There was a girl from Brazil. There was a girl from the US, and there was also a little boy from China. And we wanted to talk about how even little kids using their imagination can actually create and innovate just as much as we are right now. So that was the whole narrative around the film.
This AI movie thing, I think it is very interesting for most of us, because this is the first time I think you had mentioned that it is UN's first AI. Yeah. So I think we have the privilege to have someone who had led the team, because I have not seen such a thing. So it's very new for me. I'm pretty sure it's new for so many people. There are ads which has come out, and a lot of talks around it, whether it is ethical, or how are people losing jobs with that, or is it something which is going to replace. And as you mentioned, it is more like ethical AI which has been come into picture. So this whole idea of ethical AI and land reformation is something completely a new level of futuristic idea, I believe, because moving forward, we need to integrate high level of technology into, curbing these kind of issues or talking about it. And you had rightly mentioned when we were talking that, do you think urban people or the people from the other segments are more affected because of land restoration problems? Or do you think that it is more, we are privileged when we are in the urban segment, we don't see that part where the highest impact is on the people who are not urban. So do you think that is what is happening in the world right now, because you are coming from that segment?
I think, as I mentioned, it's and this is something which actually my boss spoke about, because he came from from Kerala, and he was telling us about how when he was a child he would go to the water body that's close to his home, and he could see where the food comes from because he had like a farm, and etc etc. So there was a, like, land for him was everything. Like, you worked there, you saw exactly what plant was being used to make medicine. You have a back pain, sure, we have the medicinal plant in our backyard. But do I really see that right now? No, I live in a building. I don't really see. I get my groceries in 10 minutes on Blinkit, and so I think there is a discord between what we don't see and what we see, and I think that's probably why I think that us being in an urban setting, we don't really connect with land. We don't really see the benefits and the usage of land. But having said that, I think the negative effects of land degradation is being seen around the world, whether you come from an urban setting, whether you come from a rural setting, because land degradation also adds to exacerbating climate change. It leads to poverty. It leads to communities being vulnerable to wildfires, floods, diseases, etc. So I think the impact of land degradation is seen in all contexts, regardless. But our connect to land when you're in the urban sector is definitely decreased a lot right now, and I see that with myself. I see that I can see the difference between how my parents think about land and how I see land and how I see the utility of the land. But of course, I mean, that's the kind of narrative that we're trying to change here, and that's why we want young kids to really go out there and watch how a plant is growing. How does a plant really grow? What kind of nutrition should you give it to them? So I think it's very important to bring back that connection and to start seeing that connection.
Thank you, Apoorva. And you had already spoken about it, but could you mention some of these programs where the students can apply for a land reformation if they want to go for the studies, or just say they want to familiarize with the subject more?
Absolutely. I think every time I go for any meeting where there's young people, the one question I get is, how do I work at the UN? How do I, I'm really interested in this sector. How do I really tap into this sector? Of course, UN has multiple agencies right now. It's a huge agency, so it doesn't matter whether you've learned medicine, you've learned engineering. There's a space for all of you when it comes to the UN, the framework, because if you look at WHO, they deal with the medical part of things. If you look at UNEP, it deals with environment. UNCCD deals with land. ILO deals with labor. And in all of these, there are program managers, there's project managers, there are people with agriculture backgrounds, there are people with who are architects, artists, etc. So I think the opportunities are plenty when it comes to the UN and the opportunities within the UN. As somebody who's still studying, the first step to joining the UN itself is either through an internship, or there's something called the UN volunteers. So the volunteers, you get something like a stipend, and then you work in different contexts, whether it's in India, whether it's outside India. There are plenty of opportunities as a UN volunteer. As an intern, in India itself, there's of course plenty of opportunities to join as a UN intern. Unfortunately, a lot of UN internships don't offer a stipend, but there are now a lot of UN agencies that offers a pretty good stipend for your living expenses while you're interning there. That is one way. Now, working at the UN essentially does not mean working directly with the UN. We work a lot with various organizations, civil society organizations, various entities around the world who works for the mandate or works in various areas that the UN stands for. So even working and identifying those kind of organizations that fits or aligns with your interest is a way of contributing to the UN and to the cause of the UN. If you are looking at resources, how can we learn more about land restoration? There are plenty of resources on our website, which is the G20 Global Land Initiative. You can check UNCCD website. You can also I would urge all of you to go and type, degradation crisis, desertification crisis on your, on Google, and see what are the kind of searches that's popping up. How can you learn more about it? There are different courses on Coursera where you can learn as well. So plenty of opportunities when it comes to learning more about it, but that's one way. And then of course, joining the UN and working there is another way of engaging. And I really do hope that I get to see some of you as my colleagues as well in the future.
Thank you for that. And Apoorva, we will just open the floor for questions. Do we have any questions?
Yes, do we have any questions? Because I guess one of the main questions that they would have probably wanted to ask, you have already covered it. The last question, it was definitely something everybody would have wanted to ask, but is there anything more that like any of you would love to pitch? Anything regarding
You can ask
this?
me anything. It doesn't matter. You can ask me anything about
Can you please
land.
pass on the mic?
There's no right question.
Hi, my question is related to the volunteering program that you mentioned. So I have been following you, and I've been following you when you used to put videos about how you can apply in UN. And I was in France during that time, and I used to do a lot of application, but probably didn't go through. Right now, I'm here back in India. I've started my own company, Rivago. It's something related to sustainability as well. It's an aggregator platform for thrifting. My question is, being a founder here in India, can I still be a volunteer? Because in my school days, I used to go for this, MUNs, and I used to attend like Harvard MUN in Hyderabad. And I used to be like, always wish if I could be part of the UN someday to contribute something to the society. Is it something I can also do, or is it just for like students or people who are completely free and, who can dedicate 100% to the UN?
I think you're already doing something to the environment and to the society. So that's the first step. But so UNV, when it comes to the volunteer program that we have, it's not just for students. They work. It depends on the project, and it depends on the organization that's offering the UNV contract. In fact, the AI movie that I spoke about, we had about 4 volunteers who worked on the film on various topics such as audio engineering, marketing, distribution, all of that. So we do work sporadically with UNV. But UNV as a platform is also huge because they have a lot of projects. So if you open the website, you'll see part-time opportunities, you'll see full-time opportunities, you'll see something called the International UNVs, which is a full-fledged job for young people to be engaged with, where they usually stationed in some other part of the world and working on the ground. So yeah, I think there's various opportunities to be a part of, but also, I mean, you have a company of your own. I would even say look at collaborative opportunities to be working with UN, not as a volunteer, but what can you do? Pitch it to somebody that you know. Pitch it to somebody who works in the UN who's working in a similar sector. See what kind of collaborations and points of what point can you bring into the UN? Maybe it's to be a part of a conference. Maybe it's to collaborate with the UN and do and have a new initiative of your own. So there are plenty of ways to look at it because, as I mentioned, UNCCD also does not directly work on the ground. What we do is we work with organizations that works on the ground, and we give them technical expertise, knowledge management, capacity building, etc. So we survive because of organizations and entities such as yourself.
So, that's definitely a great idea about, how if we could collaborate, that would be lovely. So where could we actually reach out? Because through collaborations, we can bring a bigger impact. How can we do such collaborations?
So I would first ask you to identify what organization and what aspects of this. As I mentioned, UN is huge. You have UNEP, UNCCD, CBD. You have many different organizations. It would help to first look into what are the different platforms out there, what are the different agencies out there, identify which part of it you'd want to collaborate with. Almost always there is a contact form. There is somebody that you can reach out to on the website itself, and you'll always get a response. Another thing that I did when I was looking for a job is I used to cold email people left, right, and center. So on LinkedIn, I would reach out to somebody, I would check their profile, learn that they're working in this sector, reach out to them, say that this is what I do. Would you like to learn more about it? I'd love to get on a call. So it never hurts. You might send 10 emails, but you'll definitely get like 1 or 2 responses out of that.
Thank you so much, Apoorva. Thank you.
Oh, that was very insightful. I think that cold email thing, no, that we don't want to do it, but when you told it, it's like
But that's how you get a job. So
so it's like everyone knows how to get a job now. I mean, at least you know that cold emailing is not bad, and be shameless. It is okay. It is okay as far as the work is.
I would actually say it talks a lot about you taking initiative, right? Rather than it being a shameful thing, you're really interested in someone's initiative and you want to do everything to be a part of it. I would say it's a very courageous thing to do and you should all do it.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that, Apoorva. And I think it was a very beautiful session. I think we had more sleepy people in the beginning. I think we have managed to even ask a question and give some tips. Thank you for that, Apoorva, and thanks for hearing us.
Thank you so much. It was indeed a multi-dimensional conversation, I must say, rather than just the regular sustainability topics that we are all well aware of. She has added much more new layers to our awareness of sustainability. And thank you so much for that. And may I very, very humbly request Dr. Monu John, the Honorable Head of CMS Business School, Jain Thampi University, to kindly join with us and express our deep reverence and respect for having brought such unique perspectives on sustainability to the Summit of Future, please. And thank you so much, Apoorva. You have definitely inspired many students out here to do their part. And also a big thanks to Ms. Renjini Thampi for having done that part of navigating through the session so very beautifully. You have brought in so much more than that what we could have dreamt of. So can we please put our hands together once again for this two wonderful speakers and this eminent personality, Dr. Monu John, for having conducted such a wonderful fireside chat.